Hey friends, Seeking Our Spirit is back, episode 53. Good to be with you guys. Have a great episode for you. Sat down with an old friend of mine, Melanie Alexander, of Alma Diem and Creating Goodness, and many other talents and accomplishments. So I hope you enjoy a bit of our conversation and her story. As always, I would love for you to come on the show and tell your story. Contact me at seekingourspirit@gmail.com or leave us a story at 615-933-9737. We'll share it on the show. As always, appreciate all the love and support. Hit those like buttons and share episodes. Tell people about the show, and appreciate folks who subscribe and support financially as well. You guys make this all doable. So really appreciate it. Enjoy this episode. Want to plug another time for my friend Caroline Vogel, a retreat that she is leading. She does a wonderful job at this. If you're looking for something to feed your soul, this would be a great opportunity to retreat, to ground you in a greater sense of peace and open to the breath of the Spirit, led by Caroline Vogel. That is the first weekend in August, and you can find out more about that opportunity and register at carolinevogel.com. All right, friends, hope you enjoy, and we will talk to you soon. Peace. All right, we are rolling. We've chatted a lot already, but welcome, Melanie Alexander. Good to have you with me this morning or this afternoon now, and excited to reconnect with you. Obviously, we knew each other in school and in various ways growing up, but it's been a long time, so excited to share with you this day and catch up with you and hear about your journey. So thanks for being here with me.
Thank you so much, Brett. Do you know that it has been 25 years?
Oh my gosh, that makes me feel so old.
I know,
Thanks for
me
that.
too.
Yeah.
It goes so quick, huh?
Yeah, totally. Well, and you are doing some exciting stuff as well in your personal life. I guess you would probably say those coincide with your spiritual life, but why don't you just tell folks who are you, where you're from, what you do first, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. Just for context, my name is Melanie Alexander, and I am a multi-passionate entrepreneur. That is the only way to explain my very strange, crazy life.
Yeah.
And it's funny, too, because growing up in the South in such traditional values, if you had asked me when we left Bearden High School what my life would be like, I would have been married, a dog, kids, all of the things. Yeah. And I had this whole idea of how it would be, college education. And because of tragedies and triumph, it just went into such a different path.
Yeah.
And so college for me was short-lived. And because my freshman year of college was 9/11.
Oh, yeah.
Too. So there was just so much in the world and personally that happened at the time. But I ended up doing the vocational route. Well, you know how it was at Bearden High School. There was college preparatory, and then there was vocational life. And not a lot of people were doing that vocational calling. It was all college prep. And then I ended up in vocational life. Yeah. So I became a massage therapist and have done that for 20 years.
You still offer that?
I don't anymore.
Yeah.
But I still have such a deep love in my heart for it. And that included horses and dogs.
Oh, yeah.
And I was actually a prenatal specialist. Oh, so after I saw my best friend's son be born, everything changed, and I became a doula and a prenatal specialist. Oh, cool. And so I've been a part of hundreds of birth experiences.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so I just love that part of my career, doing energy medicine as well. And so did that for a long time.
When you say energy medicine, what? Just break down for people.
Yeah. So basically we have these 7 energy centers on our body where we hold energy. So if you get stressed out, you don't really feel it in your forearm.
Right.
It's usually in your heart or your tummy.
Right.
And so...
Talking chakras.
Or we do a healing touch spiritual ministry, which is through the Christian lens, which is really cool. So it goes back to what Jesus did of the laying of the hands, the anointing of the oils. Yeah. It's a form of prayer and meditation to help people reprocess whatever they have going on in their bodies and their hearts.
Yeah, awesome.
You know how when you're in kindergarten and your teacher says, stay out of Jimmy's baby's bubble.
Yeah.
Yeah. We always have that bubble.
Right.
That's just called our biofield.
Yeah.
And so being with somebody in that space and helping them shift negative into positive and being witness for them is what some of that is. That's the short answer of it.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. And so, sorry, I interrupted you with that question, but yeah. So is that well, tell me about Alma Diem.
Yeah. Okay. So massage.
If you need to fill in anything there, that's fine.
That's awesome that you asked about my company, Alma Diem. So massage therapy is how it started.
Okay.
Well, then I got this really weird feather in my cap. That's so fun. I became a wine sommelier. Mm-hmm. And so I have this love of wine because being of a Catholic background and a Greek heritage, wine was around. And I just think it is one of the most beautiful art forms on the planet.
Yeah.
And so I was hosting wine events and tastings, and that was super fun. And then the strangest thing in the world happened. And I got cast on a television show that won an Emmy.
Oh, cool.
And what was so wild is one of the celebrities that was on the show with me was pregnant with her first baby. And I was a prenatal specialist and a doula. And we both loved wine. And the conversation just flowed. And long story short, she hired me to be her doula. And because of who she is, I was featured in People magazine. And because I was on this NBC hit show, I got this little 15 seconds of fame, here locally in Knoxville, where people were like, oh, cool, this local girl did this thing. Yeah. And so, and then I became this doula that was, successful. Yeah. And so when that spotlight came and God had entrusted me with that, I started praying, what would you have me do? And that's when I got this beautiful spiritual download of my company, Alma Diem. And we started the first co-working space in Knoxville. Oh, cool. And it has been 11 years. And so we are a business community. So we have like-minded entrepreneurs under one roof and a shared co-working environment. And being a healing artist and working alone in studio, I was just so thirsty for community and networking. And so we started Alma Diem. And it has been, this is what I say about it. It has given me my doctorate in the School of Hard Knocks.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
And so from that experience, I started doing life coaching and business consulting.
Okay.
And that has been my journey the last 11 years of how I've made my living. And then this year, we have launched the new company called Creating Goodness, where we help individuals, families, organizations, and churches make more revenue. So they have more time for themselves and each other, the relationship. So we maybe can talk about that more at the end.
Yeah.
But that's sort of my strange, bizarre, fun
That's awesome.
timeline. And I could tell you guys stories of private jets and wild things that have happened,
That's so cool. So I missed all of it. I didn't know anything about a show or anything like that. So that's awesome. And then one clarification question about Alma Diem. So are all the entrepreneurs that are involved there in the healing arts, or is it can it be any sort of entrepreneur?
So when we started it out, the vision was to get as much diversity as we could. So we had everything from web developers to massage therapists and everything in between.
Yeah. Okay.
But now it's been through 4 iterations in the last 11 years, just based on the economy and how trends change. The pandemic created some really interesting shifts because the people that didn't need physical space started working from home and staying from home. But it actually ended up strengthening our model in the end because the people that are with us really need brick and mortar.
Yeah.
And so now we're more like wellness and salon suites. We have a lot of amazing hairdressers, massage therapists, estheticians, nurses, energy practitioners, and that kind of stuff now.
Okay.
It'll be interesting to see how it continues to evolve too. But I will say this, I love my Alma Diem girls so much. I love you girls. They are my family, and we have the best bond.
That's awesome.
There is no negativity. There's not a bad apple in the bunch, and I just thank God every single day for them.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
That is cool stuff.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to bore your listeners
Oh, you're not going to bore anyone.
with my, strange resume of things, because when you have the blessing of being on a podcast, called Seeking Our Spirit.
She came with a list, people. She's got a list.
I came with my list. And so here's what I thought we might be able to have a conversation about.
Okay.
Which is, what does it mean to be Spirit-led?
Mm-hmm.
Because as a priest, you got a call. Mm-hmm. And you had to lead Spirit, let Spirit lead you in this wild ride that is your life. And would you agree that everybody is that way, right? Everybody gets the...
I believe it is. I mean, so it's interesting because that question... In my mind, I don't know if you hear it this way, like when you hear other episodes, but that's your question is really sort of what I'm attempting to get at in these episodes, right? That's what I'm meaning when I start from the base belief that there is this thing we call God, there is the Holy Spirit, and that we all are led, right, and guided. We all have a purpose, but there's so much. We don't know what we mean when we say that word, spirit or spirituality. What is that? And then I find people don't really know, and I know it gets annoying, but I'm always talking about, like, what are the languages that God or spirit use to guide you? Because if you don't, I think there's certainly a lot of people, and this isn't like a knock or a judgment, but there's certainly a lot of people that just, for whatever reason in their life, have never stopped to even ask that question or think about it. So that's one thing. If you've never even just, as Richard Rohr would say, like broken the container and gone out in that other part of life, then you haven't even sort of had that starting place. But then if you are there, you sort of have to develop an understanding, which there's no real guidebook for how to do this, but an understanding of what your personal relationship with God looks like. So when the Spirit moves in your life, what does that look like? Because if you're not asking that question, then also you're probably missing the signs all the time. So I don't know why I went down that trail there.
I love that you just went down that trail.
Yeah.
Because I was going to share 5 things.
Yeah.
That for me were, what does it mean to be Spirit-led, and what does that look like? And what's so wild about what you just shared is the very first thing on my list is that committing to a loving inner narrative. So if you think about it, we have our relationship with God. We have that inner narrative, which is like, how when you stub your toe and you go, dang it, Melanie? Well, who's talking to Melanie?
Yeah, right.
Like, what is that inner narrative? And then you have what, like, psychologists may call the self, like your capital S self. And so for me, it was, well, what is the inner narrative? Because I've learned that it's my responsibility to make sure that it is the most loving, kind, nurturing, encouraging place on earth and beyond, is that space between. And I started saying yes to reparenting myself. So if I said, oh gosh, you look like crap today, or you did a really bad job, instead of, going down that shame spiral, being like, well, wait a minute. No, you're so loved. You're so beautiful. Well, we want to encourage you. And it was that process of stopping, acknowledging that negativity is the dark side, and get behind me, Satan. We don't work for that entity. We work for this most loving, non-judging, beautiful God.
Yeah. Yes.
And so it was this practice. So it's like you said about Richard Rohr and breaking through the container. First, it was asking the question of, well, who's talking to me? And who am I talking to? And who am I listening to? And because there's yourself and your inner narrative and that divinity within. And then there's also, at least in my understanding of this Father, this formlessness, and this Jesus, this form, and then Spirit, this sort of whispering, and this pull. And so the first thing is exactly what you said, Father Brett, which is this breaking through the container of, who am I talking to? Is it the most loving, kind, compassionate, safe place on earth? And developing that relationship. And it's really interesting. I was listening to a podcast by this guy, John Doty.
Mm-hmm.
And he is a professor at Stanford, I think. And he's a neuroscientist.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the weirdest part. He's an atheist.
Yeah.
So I got really interested in listening to what he was talking about. But even he was talking about the importance of this loving, kind narrative. Mm-hmm. And he said that with that, you can manifest your dreams. And what's so strange about his perspective is, although it's different than mine, I could really appreciate, is what you think about is what you speak about is what you bring about.
Oh, yeah.
And this is like proven.
Yeah.
It's starting to be proven. And for those of us who have this connection and understanding with faith, mm-hmm. that's where it gets really exciting, because we can actually take an action step mm-hmm. in a different direction if we want our lives to be more fulfilling and satisfying, joyful and happy, mm-hmm. by just committing towards a more loving inner narrative and start embracing this loving, curious relationship with God. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to just basically say, step one, and what does spirit-led mean?
Yeah.
From little Melanie Alexander, who is not qualified to even talk about these things.
Totally are, yeah.
But is what you're talking about opening that container and committing to that practice. Mm-hmm. I have to do it every day, 1,000,000 times a day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a lot. I mean, like, we could have a whole episode just on that. I mean, there's so much just within that step, because starting to think about, well, like, I've done a lot of work with people where eventually they realize, well, that negative voice is my own voice, or that negative voice is my parents' voice, or that, but they associate it with spirit or God.
Yes.
Right. And it takes time in working with different practices and stuff to help people get to a place where they experience what you're talking about. Like, oh, there's this other voice that is fully loving, accepting, and, and
I
that's
would love,
God. Let's not project all this other crap onto what we see as God.
Yes. I love how you said it too, because my North Star with that practice has always been, if it is not love, it is not God.
Yeah.
And we don't work for that entity. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that helps me in my conversion experience, because what I love so much about Jesus is the worst day became the best day mm-hmm. in only 3 days. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, he had that horrific beating and death. And then what came next was this stillness, this silence. And it's this processing. Mm-hmm. And then it was this awakening. And I love that Christ conversion. And so, oh gosh, we could do a whole episode on just this, because what I decided to be committed to, despite a lot of trauma that I have survived, is that Christ conversion of turning pain into power, mm-hmm. because it's there every time. Also, in quantum physics, you know how if, like, you take a basketball mm-hmm. and you throw it with all your might on the floor, mm-hmm. it is going to bounce up equally as high as how much energy it was thrown down.
Yeah.
And so anytime I've been at rock bottom, there has always been this place in me that goes, well, for how low I am in this moment, it's actually guaranteed that I can bounce up equally as high.
Oh, that's good. That's interesting.
And so here's the next step, the number 2 of my 5.
Okay. Like, do you mind if I just also, because you said, I just want to comment on one other thing. So that whole, I forgot how you said it, but the being able to manifest or take action, like, your thoughts matter, right, is essentially what you said.
Sure.
And I just love, because this is happening more and more. It's fascinating, because the church, we were talking a little bit about this before, but big church, right, organized religion seems to be on the decline. At the same time, there's all these places where physics, where, just the sciences are starting to, like, corroborate what has been taught in religion or spirituality for centuries.
Yes.
And one of them is that. I mean, that's an ancient saying, I believe, coming out of, like, old Hindu texts of, like, be careful your thoughts, they become your words, be careful and it just goes down to, like, they create your destiny. And then the other tie-in I would point out there is, like, that principle is in some way it's one of the founding principles, I would say, of the Episcopal Church, because unlike most denominations are formed around like, well, we fought about whether or not an infant should be baptized, and we disagree, so therefore we believe this, and so denominations are formed over disagreements. Not to get into Anglican history, but like there's a lot to it. But part of what shaped it was the desire to unite Catholic and Protestant, and so instead of forming it on you have to believe this to be a part of this group, it was, this is the way we're going to worship. And they left out those requirements of the beliefs. So the saying, to get to my point, was, praying shapes believing, believing shapes living, right? So
say that one more time.
So how you pray, how you worship, that affects what you believe.
What you believe.
And what you believe shapes how you live.
I
right?
love that so much.
Yeah.
I love that so much. And isn't it cool that there is this uprising of the sciences supporting?
Yeah, it would seem to be, yeah.
It's so cool. I just love that so much.
So sorry.
Yeah.
So number 2. Sorry.
No, never sorry. So yeah, number 2. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Tell me what you think as a theologian. Urgency.
Theologian, I don't know.
Was that complimentary? So, urgency. Okay. When I have been looking at Jesus's life, and please help me, I'm humble here. Was he ever like running around with this like sense of urgency in a sense? Because if you think about it, whenever is it really do this now?
Yeah.
Because I will share with you that last year I was at the gym and there was a woman who needed CPR and mouth to mouth, which, by the way, I found out we're not giving mouth to mouth anymore.
I know, it's a new thing.
But I gave mouth to mouth because I had not been to first aid in forever.
What we were trained to do.
But, that moment was a do it now. So there are those times. But if you really think about it, and you guys can like Google this, it's called the Eisenhower method. But I use it a lot in business and in my personal relationships. It's basically something can be important and not urgent. And I like that because I think that I'm finding in what is spirit-led that if I can just pause and be in the stillness. In fact, there's this amazing quote that says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And I heard somewhere that you're not your first thought, you're your second thought. And that goes to that choice. It's kind of like with children, they make a mistake or they frustrate you, but it's not about you. It's about where they're at in their experience. So if we can pause and regulate our own system, we can usually respond in a better way. And so I was thinking that like for step 2, a lot of the big mistakes I've made, which I told you, I have a doctorate in the School of Hard Knocks, which is not because I've been successful. It is because I have failed so much. And I really believe that failure is such a part of it. Success is failure turned inside out.
Yeah.
And so
it's
all
not
of
winning and losing, it's winning and learning.
Yeah. And I feel like all of the big mistakes I've made, which I'm sorry for everyone I've ever wronged, I've thought of you, it's always because I haven't done the pause. I felt like my anxiety made me feel like I had to respond now or never.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one of the coolest business negotiations I ever had. And I got destroyed. And it cost me $20,000.
Oh, gosh.
Okay?
Yeah.
It was this man. He will remain nameless. He was, probably in his 60s. And we sat across the table from each other. And he would not speak. He would just stare me down and wait. And he was perfectly comfortable. He would say his boundary. He would say his negotiation. And he would just look at me in silence.
Yeah.
Not a negative energy. Not an intimidation. This wasn't that. But it was the power of the pause.
Yeah.
Well, I would blow it every time because I just couldn't hold it.
Yeah.
My container could not hold the pause.
Yeah.
So I started studying Japanese negotiation. And apparently the Japanese have like mastered this. And when they go into negotiate, they'll take 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Whereas like Americans, we are in such a game of tennis where it's back and forth, even this podcast. So guys, listen to this. Those of you who are listening to the pod, Brett and I prayed before we started this. And he was just taking a pause. And I wouldn't even let him. I just thought he was like maybe wanting me to pray. And he so sweetly and kindly said, no, I'm just really enjoying this silence. So for the record, pot, kettle, black, I am not good at this.
Yeah.
It's hard. I am committed to practicing this. And when I really like look at Jesus, was he ever running around? No, he told everybody, go take a nap.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. We can. I mean, yeah. Well, I think in some ways that point gets back to what we were saying earlier. Like, if we can't stop and pause to listen, then how will we ever even know that voice? Right.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot. I could go all sorts of places. I won't keep, taking you from that list. But like, I mean, that coincides with like systems theory, Rabbi Edwin Freeman, like, the lizard brain, the monkey mind, like all that's a long story, but systems theory, and he calls it the non-anxious presence when he talks about leadership. And he names that, what you're talking about, as the sort of the core telltale sign or skill of a leader.
Wow.
Is to, in the moment, not just go into your lizard brain and react to the stimulus or to the situation, but to be able to rise above or take a beat, right? Process. And then
that is probably my biggest work right now, especially in my romantic partnership too. And I have the most incredible therapist, and she talks about that frontal cortex and then the amygdala in the back. She said that it only takes a quarter of a second or something to go back in your brain back there where you're in fight, flight, freeze mode.
Reactionary.
And we have to come back to that front part of our brain so that we can be in that calm, still place. And what was so cool about Jesus? He did that perfectly, even when he was being beaten. I mean, it's just, he's so incredible how he did that.
Yeah. Read A Failure of Nerve by Friedman. You might like that.
I will so appreciate that and will. Yeah, so basically number 2 was this sort of commitment to understanding this thing we're talking about here, which is our pause, the power of the pause. So my number 3 is, I love talking about this one, signs and signals.
Right.
Okay, so it has been my experience in exploring the inner narrative, in exploring my relationship with God, that what's so cool is when you're in the practice of listening, he always tends to give it in a way that I won't miss it. So like what is meant for me will not miss me. And it's always in my language that I need. That's where the Lord is just the best friend in the whole wide world. So my best girlfriend, she decided that her sign was going to be the daisies. And she would just see the daisies, and God would send them to her in these most perfect moments. And so in my company that we've talked about, Alma Diem, the co-working space, it was, so Alma means soul, and Diem means to be present in your day. So Alma Diem is to be present in your soul every day. Well, I dedicate my business and my building to my mom and my grandmothers, because my grandmother was such a huge part of my faith conversion. And when she was on her deathbed and I went to go visit her, I said, Grandma, do you promise when you make it to the other side, will you send me a sign that all is right and all will be well? And she said, yeah, baby, I promise that I will. And so she passed away shortly thereafter. And my mom and I were driving to her estate. It was a cold, icy winter day. And my mama got a hot flash in the car. And so she cracked the window just a smidge to let that cool, icy air in. And out of nowhere, in the dead of winter, a huge green poplar leaf came in through that tiny little crack and landed on her lap. And as if on cue, Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World came on the radio, which was Grandma's favorite.
Weird.
And we knew it was her. And in fact, if you guys go to almadm.com, I swear this is not a shameless plug, but you can see a granulated picture of the actual leaf.
Ah, cool.
We found out that the tulip poplar is the tree of Tennessee, and it's known for its 3 prongs, like Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And so whenever I'm down and out, I always see the leaf. And then there's the apple. So every time I would visit my grandma when I was little, she would always gift us with a green apple. And so if you guys come visit Alma DM, you'll see the apples and the leaves are everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, fast forward 5 or 10 years later, my yaya was on her deathbed. This is my dad's mother, my Greek grandmother. And she named me Melanie. And I went to thank her because I've always connected with my name. And she says, "Do you know what it means?" And I said, "No, what does it mean?" She says, "It is after the Greek word milia, which means the sweetest apple."
Wow. That's great.
And so that was like interwoven in my personal story from all of those generations past. And so I feel so special that was anointed in that way.
Yeah, that's powerful. I mean, and that's one of the quote unquote languages I talk about with people on here is like these things people want to call coincidences. If you're paying attention, there's meaning, behind these things that happen to us. But again, if you weren't even asking those questions or paying attention, you could have never put any of that together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I have 2 more stories. And the intention of me telling these stories is for the pod, you guys can actually ask for these things too. So, and God will speak to you and send them in your language, your daisy, your apple, your leaf. So, Father Brett, have you ever heard of this camp called Life Teen? It's in Georgia. It's a Catholic thing, but it's really cool. They have programs, and it's great for teenagers and kids. Well, I went one year as a counselor, and it's so cool because they do Mass outside. And to be in nature and then receive the Eucharist was just the most amazing thing for me personally. But in the night, on the last night we were there, they sent us out into the twilight. And I remember leaning against a tree and feeling the stability of it, and then asking God, what should my practice be in leaving this space so I can feel as alive tomorrow as I do tonight.
Yeah, that's always the bummer. Those things you go back and it's like...
It's such a buzzkill, right, when you leave. And so it was so strange. The Lord put it on my heart to be devoted to the rosary. For 3 months. Okay, I don't know if the listeners know, but this is like 25 flipping minutes.
That's a lot.
It's a big dedication.
Especially the Catholic rosary. Is a lot. Yeah.
I mean, and I was like, really, God?
Yeah.
And I was like, no, really. And so I started this thing. Well, what's interesting is the last month of my devotion to this practice that, by the way, I did not want to do. And I did find a CD set to music that helped.
Yeah.
But I was actually driving from Tennessee all the way out to San Diego, and I went northbound on the way out so I could take my time through the Rockies and through Zion. And I was finishing the last month of this devotion, and I was with a really dear friend for that last leg of the journey. And I told this friend, "Hey, I'm doing this devotion. Do you want to join me in it?" And the friend was on board. Yeah. And so we started doing it together. On the last day of the 3 months, we serendipitously landed in San Diego, our final destination. And we pulled up, and I said, "Let's run to the beach," because we were just so excited to have our feet in the sand. And so as we're running so hard through the sand, and we make it, and our feet kiss the ocean, and it's just this beautiful moment, my feet start to sink down into the wet sand, and I pull my foot up. And below my foot was a single red rose petal. And I look around because I'm like, somebody has had flowers on the beach.
Yeah.
And I show my friend, and I'm like, "Look, are you messing with me? Like, what's going on?" And we're looking, and there was nothing.
Yeah. Huh.
And that was such a hardcore nature, physical, tangible thing of, I see you, my daughter.
That's beautiful.
And the last story that I'll share is my sweetheart. He said, do you think our love could do anything? Do you think we could attract something into our lives and co-create it? And I said, well, sure. What do you want to do? And he said, how about we find a $2 bill? I was like, okay, so we want to ask God for a $2 bill.
All right.
I remember my grandpa used to have them, you know, the tooth fairy would bring them.
Yep.
And so we just kind of said this, not to test God, by the way.
Yeah.
But just as will you speak to us in this fun way? It was this very playful way. And so one day I came home from work and I had gotten the mail, and I don't get the mail. I hate going to the mailbox to get the mail because our mailbox is quite far away from the home. And came home, set it down, went to go use the restroom. And then I hear my sweetheart, and he was like, Melanie. And I walk over, and there is a $2 bill.
Is it in an envelope, or is it just
Nothing.
there? No.
It is in the mail. And I said, are you messing with me? Like, I was like, please, this is sacred. I was like, please don't. And I was getting mad.
Yeah.
And he was like, you're messing with me. And it was this whole thing.
Yeah.
And we weren't messing with each other. And we were looking for, you know, was a realtor doing this as some kind of a marketing?
Yeah, like a note or something. Yeah.
Nothing.
That one's insane.
And we have it framed.
Yeah, that's cool.
You know, in our house. And so whenever I get out of a line...
Maybe you two should start manifesting some more stuff.
Make some more money. How much money you need at this Episcopal church? Y'all need a new paint job on the outside. But it's like, I'm not saying, because please, for the listeners too, these are my most... of 40 plus years of life. Like, these are my most rich, wild stories. So I don't want everybody thinking that it's always going to be a 2x4.
Yeah.
Where God is going to hit you with the 2x4.
Right.
But he can. But most of the time, it's in that little whisper. Because God had told me a few weeks ago to get more fire extinguishers for Alma DM. You guys, we had a fire 2 weeks ago. And we were able to put it out with the fire extinguishers. And everything was okay. So it's just the signs and signals. I would just say that's like number 3.
Pay attention to them, Pay
attention.
Once again, though, if you're not open to it.
That's right. You'll miss it.
Right.
And actually, that's what a lot of my friends say. This is always happening to you, Melanie. But it's only happening because I am committed to the practice of the listening.
Exactly.
And you know, it's not just signs that you'll see, but it's people. God will send us people that maybe we haven't seen, or maybe we haven't met, that we're supposed to reach out to or listen to. It's interesting. I cannot go to the grocery store and stand next to someone and not be conscious of a prayer for them, because I just feel that we were supposed to be standing in line next to each other. And so it's that kind of...
That's a great practice.
It's really fun. You know, the more that you do it, the more it's amplified too. It's kind of like going to the gym, you know, the more that you do it, it builds on itself, and the more powerful it becomes. So whenever people say, oh, that's just a Melanie thing, I say, no, it's a practice thing, and you have it too.
It's the hidden Christ I talk about all the time. It's like, sounds so easy, but it's like super hard to be that mentally disciplined to, like, every person you encounter go, I recognize Christ in them.
Yeah. You know? The hardest practice ever is when you're driving and somebody cuts you off.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
To give them the
Christ in you.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. To, like, give them the benefit of the doubt. And by the way, I fail every day, all the time.
Oh, yeah.
All the time. So then that brings me to number 4 of 5. Flexibility. Okay, so I learned a new word last year, and the word is called schema. So at the beginning of the pod, I was talking about how when I was a little girl, I thought I would just be married at 18, kids, the whole be a teacher, graduate from college. And I had these sort of romanticized ideas of what I thought life would be, feel like, and look like. And that was success. And my life has not turned out like I thought it was at all. That schema is completely different. And I have been through and still go through periods of low-grade grief where I'm going, well, I'm not where I thought I was supposed to be.
Sure.
And I think that a lot of us have this common thing of trying to reconcile that our lives don't look, feel, whatever, as they, quote, should be in our schema.
Right, because where does that should be come from?
Right. And so if you would, in your charity, pray for me with that, because it is still hard. And, I think, too, with people going through divorces or losses, I just heard that there was that awful shark attack last week in Rosemary Beach. To have a literal limb, talk about a schema of how you think your life is going to be and then it's not. But it's so interesting because if we can be flexible and surrender our lives to God and allow God to mold us like the jars of clay, it makes reconciling that difference easier. And so I think staying with the flexibility of that, the truly accepting the present moment and where we are, trusting in what was and looking forward to what will be, even if it's not what we thought. Maybe it could be something better. There was this cute little graphic that was going around social media I love so much, and it was this little girl, and she was begging Jesus, who was in front of her, for this teddy bear, and or he was, I think, holding the teddy bear behind his back, and it was bigger than the one she was holding. It was this whole, I can't say it right, but it was this whole philosophy of God has something bigger and better in mind always. And it's that walking by faith, not by sight. And so that's always been really hard for me. And that the mantra again of what is meant for me will not miss me. So that was my number 4. And then lastly, the number 5, when to know when to fight for something and when to know when to let it go. There were 2 different times that I almost lost my business, Alma DM. And the first time happened in 2017. Some of the entrepreneurs had just invested tens of thousands of dollars into their suites, and I did not own the commercial building. And the landlord said, you have 14 days per your lease agreement to come up with this money, or we're going to sell it.
Wow.
And Starbucks wanted it, and it was going to be demoed.
Whoa.
So I wasn't just fighting for me and my selfish reasons why I wanted to keep this business going. I was fighting for the entrepreneurs that invested tens of thousands of dollars and what was going to happen to them.
Yeah.
And so in 14 days, we came up with this absurd amount of money that I did not have.
Yeah.
And God was saying very specifically, you need to fight. And then the surrender. Oh gosh, I have so many stories of surrender. But the biggest one in business happened this last year, where I had put my business up for sale. Because it was built in 1977 and it needed a lot of renovations, and I didn't have that kind of capital. And I did not want to increase rent where these families were going to be affected negatively. And so I thought, I'll just let it go and I'll surrender it. And I did. I put it on the market. We got lots of offers. But something inside was like, wait. It was that stillness. All of the entrepreneurs got together and decided to invest in that building.
Oh, cool.
So that I could stay.
Yeah.
And that they could stay.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so last year we completely renovated it and built more offices and made it work so that it can sustain. And it's just incredible in that knowing when to surrender and knowing when to fight. And that takes a lot of the discernment.
Exactly.
So if people say, well, what is discernment? How do you discern something like that? For me, what it looked like is it was to share to God with all the passion that I had. I really want this, God. And then let go. And if he makes it so, then we know. And then if not, then you know that there's something better on the other side. And I also feel like people have to meet God halfway, is what I say. So you have to do your part.
Right.
In the work, saying yes to the hard work, because this work is hard. Like, it's not lost on me that I'm talking about asking simple, like you said, but really, really hard practices for people. And a lot of times that takes space and margin. And so that's because of these amazing entrepreneurs that saved the empire, as we like to say. We call it the Fempire, y'all. But I started thinking about, what am I going to do next? And that's when the idea of the new company, Creating Goodness, was born. I wanted to create something for the entrepreneurs, but also for individuals, families, organizations, churches, where we could make more revenue for them. Well, why did I want to make these people more money? I wanted to help these people make more money so that they could have more margins in their lives, so that they could have more time for prayer, for reflection, to be with their families, to afford therapy if they need it, or their kids' baseball team, or a family vacation and pause. And so this idea came to be of Creating Goodness. And what we've done is we've created a virtual gift shop. So we're working with local companies, and basically we give them a link, and you can sell the products, and you can make money. And it is literally that simple.
That's awesome.
And so the company is going to be formally launching in August. So for any of the listeners, if you are in need, you don't like your job, it's unfulfilling, you need some additional income, revenue, you can reach out to us and we can have a conversation about what's coming this fall. And then for organizations and churches, we can set it up as fundraisers. So if you have a tragedy in your church or your parish, we can set something up so that those proceeds go to that organization or individual in need. So we're really, really excited about it. But what I want to say on my little promotional soapbox here that you're so kind to let me do is that I hope more and more people will start thinking about problems that they can solve in the world instead of what they can gain personally.
Yeah, that's where I was going with, like, that margin, if people use it rightly, can be a vehicle for so much more good,
Yeah, because what I've learned is that everybody really can win. And there is enough for everybody. I think that scarcity is a mindset for a lot. And so I also want to say that I acknowledge how privileged I am. And I thank everybody who has helped me along the way, especially my parents who have been by my side through everything. And so I recognize that I had the resources and the freedom to be able to do that.
Yeah, sure.
And that's why I feel like the churches are so important, because as you mentioned before, there's such a decline for reasonable reasons for people. But I hope that more and more organizations, churches, businesses, people can create that sense of community for people so that people who are not as fortunate can still find a way to create that margin and that support.
That's awesome. It's a beautiful vision. That's great. And I'm excited for you guys on that. Man,
so
there's
that's
so
the pod.
much. Yeah, there's so much.
What do you think
there.
of those 5 things?
That's great. No, it's great. I just could, we could do an episode on each one, because there's so many little things I could dig into there.
Well, don't tempt me with a good time.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I would love to come back and kind of open those up.
Yeah.
But, I've known you since middle school. And it's been 25 years since high school.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, that hurts.
And it is just such an honor and a privilege to reconnect. And thank you for everything that you are doing in the community with your beautiful wife and your children and in the world. And thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for coming on. And we will do it again. If I just wanted to say, so if people were interested,
yes,
how do they get you?
Yeah. So you can email us at creatinggoodness@gmail.com.
Okay.
And you can even text me at 865-964-2848.
Awesome. Wow, that was brave. Thanks for doing that. Yeah.
I have my ways. I have my ways to protect.
Good. Yeah. Well, so folks, if you're interested either in Alma Diem or creating goodness, reach out to Melanie. That'll be awesome. I'm excited to see what's in store in the future for that vision and that project. That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm excited too.
Anything else you want to name today? Anything else you want to
Oh gosh. I mean,
talk about?
I think I've worn everybody out.
No, this is great. This is good stuff. For me, the takeaway is just because we're getting into the sort of the details of spirit in our lives and discernment, but it really is that listening, right? If we don't pause and we don't listen, and then none of what you named here today is possible without you taking a beat and trying to connect to God and listen.
I love it.
Yeah. So, good stuff. Well, thanks so much again for coming on with me. It's great to catch up with you, and we'll do it again. And maybe you'll interview me sometime.
I would love to interview you. Hey, if you guys want me to interview Father Brett, write in and let's get him to do it.
Oh, man. Okay. All right.
You heard it here first, people.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks. Blessings on you and on all the good work you're doing, and we'll catch up again.
Thank you. God bless you too.
Thank you.